Okay, so I thought we would talk about the religious allegory to this poem. So, when we're talking about allegory, we're talking about sort of layers of meaning that can be implied or inferred from the text. So, on the surface level, we have a story about uh, a ship that's lost at sea and a mariner that kills a bird and then becomes a storyteller. So there's nothing about that on the surface that is particularly religious. But when you take a closer look at some of the patterns and symbolism in the poem, we start getting some connotations of Christian um, symbols and Christianity and certain patterns that relate to that story. So for instance, this poem has been sort of taken as a kind of Christian allegory where the albatross um, almost occupies a similar subject position as Christ, where you have the albatross as kind of an innocent life, a helper, somebody who brings blessings, somebody who is innocent who dies. So who's killed and it's a kind of loss that uh, has repercussions. So there's a bit of parallels drawn between the death of the albatross and then Christ's death on the cross. And the sounds of albatross and cross could be also related there. And then we have the ancient mariner who kills the bird. He can be sort of seen as a archetypal kind of sinner. So he kind of relates to a figure like Judas in the Bible, or maybe Cain, or any sort of sinner who is punished for their crime. So he has committed a sin by killing the bird, and then he faces punishments as a result of that criminal act. So he has to make amends for that crime that he committed. And in this case, I think the sin that is most prominent, I guess, that you could read into the mariner's actions would be pride, right? So he kind of has a sense of arrogance or pride about him when he kills the bird. You know, he does it just because he can, basically, to prove that he is stronger, more superior, or more powerful than this natural, this bird. So, you know, he's stronger than nature, wants to dominate or control it. So he's prideful or arrogant in his act of killing the animal. And then another kind of aspect of the Christian allegory comes when he has to bear that cross. So the burden of the bird's death and how he has to actually wear the bird around his neck um, is sort of him wearing or bearing a cross, his sins on his body. So it's as if sin becomes a kind of physical burden on the person who commits that sin, and it takes a lifetime almost to make up for that. So his transformation is, how do you atone for your sins? How do you redeem yourself? How do you become, you know, a better person and make up for your past crimes? So that's sort of his journey um, throughout the poem, where he has to sort of find atonement or redemption. And then at the end, when he becomes a storyteller, it's almost as if he occupies this position of a prophet. So he preaches his tale to anyone who will listen, and he's become a teacher, right? So his story is going to be a tale that teaches others um, to heed his warnings and to learn from his mistakes, basically. So he becomes almost like a prophet figure, sharing this story to others, passing from land to land, and doing what he can to make amends for his past. So critics have viewed it as a kind of Christian allegory that way. You could also see it as a kind of spiritual allegory without the Christian connotations. So some people also have just view it as a kind of allegory for nature or the spiritual world, or how those two things are connected. So there is this idea that um, um, the the sin that the mariner commits is the fact that he is so disconnected from the natural world that he takes it for granted, and all the spirits in the poem kind of are embodiments of the natural world. So there's sort of sea spirits, sky spirits. They're all kind of spiritually connected to the natural world. So the lesson in this, if you read it this way, would be sort of that man or humanity shouldn't ignore nature, but in fact they should strive for a kind of almost spiritual connection to the natural world. And by killing the albatross, it's evident that the mariner is disconnected from the the natural world, disconnected from the spiritual world, and he has to become he improves his life and makes up for his sin by blessing nature, right? So we saw him blessing the sea snakes. So this is him growing in appreciation, becoming more connected to nature, and becoming a better person by appreciating all the gifts that nature gives to him, whether it's the breeze that helps his ship guide his ship to land, or the blessing of rain that comes when he's thirsty, or the beauty of the sea snakes that go in the water, or the beautiful skylark song. So all these things in nature that maybe he took for granted before, he now sees the beauty and appreciates all these little things that the natural world can give him as gifts. So he grows as somebody who appreciates nature. And this brings us to the moral of this story. So at the very end, we do get this kind of moral. So what does it mean? What does this story mean? What do we learn from it? So he has shared the story with this wedding guest, and at the very end of the poem, he gives him a kind of greater moral explanation of what to learn from this story. So I'll just read the very end here. Farewell, farewell, but this I tell to thee, thou wedding guest. He prayeth well who loveth well both man and bird and beast. He prayeth best who loveth best all things both great and small. For the dear God who loveth us, he made and loveth all. The mariner whose eye is bright, whose beard with age is hoar, is gone, and now the wedding guest turned from the bridegroom's door. He went like one that had been stunned, and is of sense forlorn. A sadder and wiser man, he rose the morrow morn. So that those two stanzas where the mariner says, farewell, farewell, but I tell you this, prayeth well who loveth well both man and bird and beast. So he's really telling the wedding guest that to love all of God's creatures, to love both your fellow man or fellow human, and also love bird and beast. So love all of nature's creations, all of the creatures that make up the natural world, because they're all God's creations. And so you're supposed to love all things, both great and small, for the dear God who loveth, he made and loveth all. So all of the world is made of God's creations, natural world included. So even a lowly insect or a sea snake or whatever, all of these things are God's creations. So we have to learn this lesson that we should respect the natural world, and not take it for granted. So this is kind of the moral or lesson that he is trying to pass on by telling this story to anybody who he can kind of find who needs to learn this lesson. So basically, yeah, the mariner's moral is it's sort of a preaching of respect for the natural world, and it is a way, if you're connected with the natural world, you're going to be spiritually blessed. So to respect God or all of God's creations, you have to respect all of nature, including birds, beasts, sea slugs, spiders. Everything is a blessed creation, basically. So learning this, the wedding guest is left a sadder and wiser man. So it's a lesson that he learned that made him maybe a little bit sadder, right? Don't take things for granted. He's a wiser person because of it, but he's changed because of hearing this story. So it's going to be passing along this information. So I think overall this poem is, it's very old-fashioned on one level, but it's also kind of almost like it's kind of like an environmentalist theme that still resonates today, I think, where you think of, how all things in nature are connected, and it's part of our responsibility as humanity to take care of all things in this world, not just ourselves, but to care for all creatures. So it's an interesting message